Please welcome Mr. DJ Krust. I've been looking forward to this one. Welcome along, sir.
Thank you.
I thought we should start this morning with a little bit of background because, you know, you've been brought up in sound and started off heavily in the sound system and hip hop thing. I just wondered if you could give us a background musically of you know, of what age and where it started for you.
Well, I kind of saw this film called Wildstar, and that kind of really started off for me. I was about 14 in school, and kind of just spiraled from there. I just watched the film, kind of emulated what the cats was doing in there, went out and bought the white gloves, started breaking, formed a little crew in school. You know, the school gave us a little room that we could break in, and we had turntables in there, and you know, they let us graffiti up the walls, and it kind of kept us out of trouble. So that's where it kind of started. You know, there's a big musical influence in the family. You know, got an older brother who had a big record collection, so I was always kind of hearing music, kind of funk and electro, and you know what I mean, like early pop music, specials, two-tone, that type of thing. So I was kind of like listening to it for a while, and then after a minute, after the Wildstar thing, I was like, right, I got to start learning how to scratch. I mean, I needed to learn how to do it. So my mum had this old gramophone type of thing, and it had like an on and off button. So I used to just sit on there every Sunday and just learn how to scratch. You know what I mean, on and off, on and off. And from there, really, it just kind of went to a youth club that we used to go to called Eagle House, and a few of us kind of got together, persuaded our parents to buy us turntables. These really crap ones with like elastic bands in them, but they were enough to kind of get us started. You know, we were just trying to figure out how to mix and how to scratch and stuff. And really, it just kind of just got from there, like the crew thing, everyone just watching Wildstar every night, and really just trying to copy what these guys were doing, and just seeing how that was done.
And what year is this?
Fucking. I don't know, 86, something like that. This is like just after school. I left school probably 84, 85.
And where are you from in the world?
Bristol.
Bristol, UK?
Yeah.
And how did that have a bearing on what you were doing and what you were getting into, crew-wise and sound system-wise?
Sound system-wise, Bristol's got a big cultural background. We have a festival down there called like St. Paul's Carnival. And you have like all the different people from all the different backgrounds. They gather around. And it's like this big event happens over a weekend. You've got all these different sound systems. Smith and Mighty used to do a set there. Wild Bunch, who now are called Massive Attack, they used to do a sound there. And it used to be this big, you know, collage of music. You know, you'd hear everything. You know, walk down this one street and there'd be everyone playing from you know, ragga to rock to, you know, Indian music. So there was this big cultural, you know, kind of input in the city at that time. You know, so you'd go out in any club, any night, you'd hear a different cross-section of music, so you weren't, you know, subjected to just one vibe all night. So you had this big, you know what I'm saying, idea of what music was supposed to be, and it wasn't just one thing, it was like a collection of all of those things, and that's kind of where the ideas were coming from.
And your mum and dad, their history, their heritage?
They're Jamaican.
Yeah. And did that have a bearing in Bristol as well on your sound system ethic, or not really?
Not really. I mean, my mum's on Sunday, you know, she get a Gladys Knight in the Pips and, you know, a bit of Marvin Gaye and stuff. And so, you know, you're listening to a lot of kind of soul and funk, a lot. And it's in the environment. You know, my brother was into like George Benson. And then when the specials and the mod thing came out, we started listening to, you know, that type of thing, and Funboy Free, and you know, then pop music and then electro craft work, that type of thing. You know, we're pretty open to music, really. I didn't really have any, you know, I'd listen to anything. It wasn't really like, oh, I don't like that, I don't like that. I listened to anything.
And so did you have your own sound system?
Well, we graduated to that. You know, we ended up buying a couple of speakers similar to those and just like taking them to youth clubs and just going around town, really, in our areas. And, you know, going to different youth clubs, going to different schools, and just like playing gigs, really, just DJing, like competitions. You know what I mean? Get that crew and this crew. They had their DJs, we had our DJs, we had our breakers, they had their breakers, and it would just be like one of those vibes that you see in the movies, kind of type of thing.
And your love of hip hop, that kind of eventually led you on to do a record, right?
Yeah. We got, my brother just drew out a couple of samples one day and put them together kind of like on a cassette and on a turntable. He was mixing them together and he just had this idea that he wanted to do a tune. We met up with these guys called Smith and Mighty. They kind of lived in the area and he just, you know, he sat in the studio for a year with these guys and made this tune. He kept coming back and playing what he'd done and we'd be saying, okay, yeah, let's try this and try that. And we didn't have a clue really about making music or the production side of things. It was just 3 or 4 samples, funky drummer, phaser riding high, and another loop I can't remember, but he just put them together, got this girl to come in, she sung over it, and then bam, it's like big tune.
And what was that tune?
It's called Wishing on a Star, and the crew we formed was called Fresh 4.
Unfortunately, we couldn't find a copy of Wishing on the Star to play because it's not even on... Where did you look?
Everywhere.
LimeWire.
Yeah.
It's nowhere, but you need to seek that tune out. You made it onto Top of the Pops, right, with that? Or?
The video did. We didn't actually go on there, yeah.
Top of the Pops is like the weekly pop show in the UK. And that tune charted in the top 40, right?
It got to number 10. So that was a good look for us. I mean, we're like 19, 20. We didn't really understand it. You know, all of a sudden we're on the front of magazines and stuff. You know, I mean, we're celebrities, we're famous, and it kind of didn't last that long. Do you know what I mean? We didn't really know what we were doing. We got signed to do an album with Virgin, and do you know what I mean? We were like attitude kids from the streets. You know what I mean? We're like, you know what I mean? We don't sell out, that type of attitude. And it was like, we really didn't understand the game and how you're supposed to play it and what you're supposed to do when you get into those positions. And what they really wanted was 10 wishing on the stars. But we were like, nah, we don't want to do that. We've already done that. Let's do this, let's do that, let's do that. And then we were supposed to do an album, but it never really worked out, and eventually we got dropped, and then back to kicking cans on the street.
And so, what happened? Can you join the dot between that and then starting to make music again?
Well, from that experience, I kind of liked going in the studio. They put us into a studio, they gave us a few pieces of equipment, and I kind of liked it. I liked fiddling around with equipment, and then when that all kind of died down, I checked my brother, and he had like this old Casio FZ1 sampler. It had like 14 seconds sample, 16-bit. So I just went to his house every day for about 3 years and learned how to use this sampler, and then learned how to use Cubase, and kind of just started getting into the production, really, just trying to figure out how to sample, how to loop, how to use these basic programs. And then it just carried on from there, really. There was a little community. There was Smith and Mighty. There was like, you know, Wild Bunch was doing something. There's a few other people in Bristol kind of doing stuff, passing around programs, you know, teaching each other how to use it. And so I kind of just mingled with these guys. Then started to hang out with Smith and Mighty more. Started to just be like the fly on the wall in their studio, really. Just used to go there every day and just stand in the corner, really, and just watch those guys, how they produced, and just checked out their techniques and what they were doing and stuff, and really just learned by observing these guys, listening to the sound, and then just going, taking those vibes home and that things. I mean, just trying to figure out how I could, you know, use it to what I was doing, really.
And when did you start to discover the sound that would eventually become yours? When did you start to mess with breakbeat and...
Well, we used to go to these things, and we used to have raves in England where you go to, out in the country, you know, you get a phone call or a piece of paper and add a number on it and stuff. So, you know, you bring the number, they tell you where this rave was, you drive out to the middle of the country and stuff. So we used to go out there and listen to this rave music all the time, and from there, really, I started to develop an idea of what I was about. You know what I mean? I was listening for breaks and beats and certain vibes in the music, and then, you know, I'd come back, and I kind of met Di by now, so I was hanging out with him. So we'd come back.
That's DJ Di, right?
Yeah. So we'd come back and we'd talk about it and stuff, and then we'd start experimenting with beats and breaks and sounds and stuff, and chopping up beats and chopping up breaks, and eventually something was starting to come out. You know, I mean, it wasn't really what was going on, but it was kind of like something that we were just pushing or experimenting with.
What year is this? Early 90s?
Yeah, early 90s. Very early 90s. And You know, we started to hear more about it. You know, you go to these raves and, you know, most of the night you'd be hearing all this techno stuff, but then one tune would come in, like, and have a break in it, and it would have like a little vocal in it, and be like, right, yeah, I like that. And so that was the kind of vibe we were looking for, something like with a bit of bass and some breaks, and then slowly we kind of figured out what we liked and how to kind of achieve that, and then we started to make more tunes like it, and then gradually over time, it kind of just progressed into this sound which they were calling jungle techno at the time, and we were like, okay, cool.
And so, I mean, it seems like a straight lineage from the b-boy ethic of you know, of breaks and hip hop straight through to that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was, for me, it was all about breaks. Yeah. It was all about the hip hop element, you know, the attitude in hip hop, and the production on the beats. I was trying to bring that into what I was doing. So we would, you know, in the hip hop era, you'd have ultimate breakbeats where everyone used to scratch up 2 copies, and so we just used those and just sampled the breaks from it, and then just sped them up a little bit, and then we carried on speeding them up. So we already had a foundation for the beats because we had a big record collection from cutting up and stuff. So we went out and bought fresh copies because the beginnings were just scratched out and stuff. So we already understood breaks and how to kind of use them. So it was just a matter of just understanding how we could speed them up and make them work in the new music that we were making.
And what were give me some examples of records that you were making at that period?
Some of the early V stuff, some of the early full cycle stuff. Music Box came out about that time, but it was kind of like in various different stages. A tune called Resistor that I did, Jazz Note, very early type of prototype type of tune. Loads of breaks, rolling, and jazz. A lot of jazz influence was in it as well.
So we should stop at this point and explain, because you were to become known best for, of course, your involvement in Full Cycle Records, but also meeting Brian G and Frost was a pretty important thing for you as well. Can you just break down both of those record label things for people that don't know about Full Cycle or V?
Full Cycle was basically started by myself and Roni Size, and basically DJ Dye and Sub. And we were just like trying to get signed, basically. We had loads of tunes that we've been making for a couple of years now, and we were sending them out to different record labels, and we weren't getting any response. And it was, you know, this was purely out of frustration that we started the label. It was like, okay, you know, we're not getting anywhere. And we just sat down one day and said, right, fuck it, let's do it ourselves. Let's figure out how, you know, to run a label, how to get this thing together, and boom, that's how the label was born. And then the meeting with Brian G and Frost, that just came about through a mutual friend who heard one of our tunes, passed it on to Brian. They were looking to start a label, they were looking for artists, and when they heard our stuff, it was like, okay, cool, it sounds like something that they would get into. The reason why we started our own label as well as Going with V, because we had so much material and it all didn't fit on Full Cycle. Full Cycle at the time was experimental, wasn't really jazzy, but it had a sort of a jazz element to it, whereas V was a bit more experimental, a bit more of the party kind of bouncy bass vibes type of thing. So there was enough to kind of go around at the time, so we put stuff out on V and stuff out on Full Cycle.
And you'd eventually do another imprint, Dope Dragon, as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, that Dope Dragon came about purely from making tunes for the weekend. You know, we were like, right, we're going to play this rave at the weekend, we need a tune for it. So we just go into the studio and just try and make a tune as fast as possible for the weekend, and go and cut it at Music House. That was a place where we go and cut our dubs and then just go and play it that night. And it became like, we used to call it the Mission Impossible. So you had to try and make a tune, get to London, cut it, and play it that night. So that was really, that's how the Dope Dragon thing came about.
And it's interesting you mentioned Music House, because that's a cutting house in London. I mean, as you know, the scene's developing in London, you know, simultaneously as you're doing your thing in Bristol. How much of that was a factor, be it a problem or a hassle? I mean, how was that being in Bristol and DJing in London every weekend?
Well, there was a community building up everywhere. There was stuff up north, Coventry, boys. You know, you had like SS in Leicester, you had Dot Scott in Coventry, and you had Back to Bases up in Birmingham. So there was a community building up, and everyone converged onto Music House. You know, it was a good meeting place. It was a good place to exchange music, exchange ideas, exchange thoughts. You know, you'd meet people on the scene. This was a brand new scene that was building up, and no one really knew the faces. You hear the names, but you didn't actually know the faces. So you go to music house, you know what I'm saying, and you'd meet people and it'd be like, rah, you know what I'm saying, oh, you're so-and-so, or you're so-and-so, and then you know, exchange tunes. And that was probably, I would say that's probably one of the highlights of the scene at the time. It was a great, do you know what I mean, communications point, and it was like a youth club, basically, do you know what I mean, where people would just go every weekend. And as far as like just DJing and stuff, I mean, me and Ronnie spent like a year sleeping on Brian G's floor, just to be in London, in the scene, around to see what was going on. I mean, we traveled like around the country, but London really was like the place where the majority of raves were happening, the majority of people were doing what we were doing. So that's where you had to go, that's where you had to be.
How did you first meet Roni Size?
I knew Ronnie for about at least 6 or 7 years before I actually met him. I knew him from being in a sound system. And Bristol's a small place, so you know everybody. You know, you can't, you know, if you're in the music scene, you meet people eventually. So he was doing a sound system, we were DJing and stuff. We broke into this warehouse in this area in town, and we needed a PA for it. So Sub contacted Ronnie, and he brought his PA down, and we started to do a regular party down there. So I kind of was getting to know him from there. But the real kind of turning point happened when we all went to Glastonbury at the same time. He was a youth worker, and he was there with some kids. Me and Dykes kind of just sneaked in and stuff, and we kind of just met up and we hung out for a weekend and talked about music. He had like loads of tunes that he was working on in his studio. We had loads of tunes that we were working on in our studio. And it kind of just made sense that we to get together and just join forces and try and make something happen.
I mean, but the model that you developed in terms of like doing a project with your mates and, you know, and having a real strong team ethic to what you were doing just seems so strong throughout the whole 90s, basically. I mean, for people from the outside looking in, it seemed like a wonderful thing to be able to achieve that, you know.
I mean, yeah, that comes from the hip-hop things, you know what I'm saying? Like, you had a crew, and so for us, it was like an extension of what we were, the other crews that we'd been in. So we just, you know, the Fresh Full thing went as far as it could go, and then it became Full Cycle. Same thing, Ronnie, he was in a crew, a sound system crew, and that probably went as far as it can go. And, you know, he joined with us with Full Cycle, and yeah, I mean, it's great. It was good fun. We had a laugh. You know, we did a lot of things together. We grew up together. You know, we were always in the studio together for days on end, just chatting, politicking, you know, daydreaming about things that we were trying to accomplish and techniques of making records. You know, we'd get a new sampler and we'd be like, wow. And, you know, we would just bury ourselves in it for days on end, trying to suss it out, trying to work out how it works and stuff. So, yeah, man, it's like, you couldn't have had a better situation.
And I imagine there was a healthy competition there as well in terms
of
of wanting to, you know,
of course,
match tune for tune.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that was the driving force behind it. You had someone did a good tune, you wanted to do a good tune as well, and that was the real driving force. And that's where a lot of the classics came from just someone going out there and making a good tune. You hearing that tune, you know what I'm saying? You know, if you're screwing your face up and thinking, fucking hell, do you know what I'm saying? It's like, that's what you want to do. You want to make a tune that has that same effect. And so you go back into the studio and you sit down and you science it and you do something as equally as good as that.
Well, seeing as you mentioned the word classic and talking about screwing your face up, I think we should play Soul in Motion. Yeah?
Yeah.
What kind of, is this the right kind of era? What time is that?
Yeah, this
95?
is definitely, this is about, yeah, 93, 94, 95, something like that. Yeah.
There's criminals cut that tune. There's another like 4.5 minutes to go. But anyway, that's just a perfect example of one of those records that you just need to. I used to play that record over and over again, and it'd just get to the end, and even though it was like 11 minutes long or whatever, I'd just pick the needle up and put it back at the start. I just listen to it over and over again. It's funny because Ben, DJ Zinc, just came up and told me a very interesting little fact that that was the first time that people started cutting on 12-inch plates because the tune was so long. That basically, is that right? Up until that point, it had all been 10-inch dub plates, but that was the first time people started cutting on 12-inch dub plates. I mean, as what's always struck me about your music is that there's that sparse thing, but it always takes, you know, the full length of the record to get your message across, you know. Has that always been important to you?
I wanted my music to be like a film.
Yeah.
You know, I had this thing that I would want to make widescreen music. And for me, it was about, you know, when you watch a film, you don't normally get it till the end. Do you know what I'm saying? And that's what I wanted people to listen to the whole track. You know, it was like, it was a journey. It was like, you know, you had different sections, you had different stories, and you had the journey went up and down. So I wanted to emulate that in the music, and I wanted to take people on that journey and on a ride. So I was basically watching a lot of films. You know, I love movies and I love the epics and the big, you know, Star Wars and Blade Runner, and you know, that's where I was getting my vibe from. You know, I'd sit in my studio, you know, with the lights out and just zone out and just do whatever came to me. I didn't really have any ideas about how it was supposed to sound. I didn't care about the length. I didn't care about, you know, I didn't really have any kind of preconceived ideas of what I was trying to get to. I was just trying to let it come out and try and just let the journey happen as it happened and when it happened. You know, that's all I really thought about when I was making music, and what I still think about now.
I mean, when that record came out, it was so different to so much of the other stuff that was around at the time. Not just the sparseness of it, but the sound effects and all the different textures going on in there. I mean, you've always struck me as someone that's really not that bothered about keeping up with whatever the latest thing is, even within one genre, and just doing your thing, basically.
I mean, I do what everyone else doesn't do. Not on purpose, but I just try and be myself. Do you know what I mean? If you're yourself, you're going to be different. You know what I'm saying? So that's why you get some artists who will stand out, because they're really just following their own thing, what they think they should be doing. And you know what I mean? That's what I try and do, is just try and, you know, do what I think I should be doing. And this is what comes out.
You're totally capable of some dance floor devastation tunes as well. I mean, it's probably worth playing Warhead next up. Is that how long after Soul Emotion? This is
kind of the same yeah, same kind of period. But it's interesting, Warhead came about because Dying and Roni made a tune called Mad Professor, and it's a typical example of the competition between us. I heard that tune in it, I was like, nah. You know what I mean? I just screwed my face up and I was like, yeah, okay. And I went home and, you know, and in the night and I made that tune, you know, simply because of that same kind of, you know what I'm saying, that was like a heavy tune. There was like vibes there, and I was like, you know what, I need to make something on that same level, that same kind of energy, that same kind of vibes. And so that's where Warhead came from.
Yeah, you're not a stranger to the bottom end, definitely a master of that, right?
No.
I mean, that tune was just massive right across the drum and bass community, right? Warhead.
Yeah, it took a while. I remember I gave it to Brian for a minute and he kind of didn't get it. And he kind of looked at me like, yeah, really? And I was like, I mean, I'd been listening to it for 3 days straight, so I got it, you know what I mean? To me, it made perfect sense. Well, I gave it to a few people, you know, Ronnie kind of like, they kind of got it. And then eventually after a while, we were all playing it for a while, and then about a year later, I think it kind of really took off. The clubs then really started to embrace it. I think back in the day, it was like, there was a real, it was like a breeding ground with music, you know. You had a tune and you had to mature it. Do you know what I'm saying? And the thing about cutting plates in a music house, you give it to the mans who really understood the tune, and they would play that tune and they would help build that tune, and it would be this process of over about a period of 3 to 4 months, you'd play it and you probably wouldn't get any reaction, but you know, you carried on playing. After 6 months, a few people would kind of get it, and after 9 months, people would start requesting it, and after about a year, then that tune was, I mean, that was like the breeding ground of a real tune, of a real classic tune. And back in the day, that's how it used to be, do you know what I'm saying? And people used to bawl for the tune. It was a natural thing, you know, and I think that it's changed a little bit now.
Yeah, I mean, for some fans of the music, that's no bad thing, because people used to have to wait about 2 years to be able to buy the records that they had you playing. But is it a bit quicker now, that turnover?
Well, yes. You know, sometimes you do a tune in 1 week and you can get it out in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. You know, you can get it out. Everyone's playing off MP3 very quickly, and you know, I think it's just a sign of times. You know what I'm saying? I think there's an urgency and there's a need now to get your music out, and not to really be that exclusive anymore. I don't think there's a need for that anymore, especially with the networks now and the community is so big now, whereas before it was like, 28 labels, and there was probably about a handful of DJs actually on the scene. Now it's like 128 labels, and like, you probably got like about 200 DJs, so there's a lot more access to, to distribute your music now.
Should we hear that? Want to hear Warhead? Yeah.
Oh, so I never see this one here.
How long? Almost 10 years now, that tune.
Yeah.
And what were you making that music on? What kind of equipment were you making that music on?
That was a 760 Roland sampler, Atari sequencing, and this shitty little fucking 12-track desk. That was it. We didn't even know how to handle proper equipment. We didn't even know how to fucking use it properly, do you know what I mean? Or EQ, didn't understand any of that. It was just get a couple of breaks, layer them on top of each other. The bass out of that is from me touching the wire and then sampling it. That's where the bass came from. I was trying to plug something in and I just touched it and went brrr. I was like, right. So I just pressed sample.
Because a lot of the music that I hear just now doesn't have that warmth, doesn't have that ruggedness.
It's the switch over to digital. I mean, the analog sound is a lot warmer, traditionally. I think that the digital switch is convenient because you've got instant recall, but you have to sacrifice something for it. I think, you can compare a lot of the tunes from back there and to now. Technically, it's unmatched. You can't beat it, but you kind of lose something. There's a little bit of warmth in there, and the bass is a bit more warmer, and the beats are just a little bit more grittier and stuff. I think there is a trend moving back towards that now, especially in our scene anyway, where we're trying to understand how to get the best of both worlds. You can't get away from the digital thing. You need it. The quality of it and the spontaneity of it is great. You need that. But on the other side of that is, you listen to tunes like that and you listen to how they sounded, and I do it all the time. I compare a lot of my tunes to a lot of my old tunes, and I'm trying to make my music sound more like this now, where it's a bit more warmer, it's a bit more fatter, and it's an ongoing struggle.
And what are you using now? What did you use for the last record?
On the last album I used, I got Pro Tools for sequencing and stuff, and I did have a Mackie desk, I got rid of it now. But I went back, I used the 760 sampler and a new sampler that I got, a new Roland sampler and keyboard and stuff. I tried to make the last album I did is in the essence of what I got my best results in. I listened to all my tunes. I put them on a CD like Soul Emotion, Warhead, True Stories. I put about 10 of my favorite tunes that I did. I put them onto my iPod and I listened to them for about 6 months. I wanted to get back into the spirit, back into that essence, back into that vibe of how I used to make music, because of the technology, it's kind of like, oh yeah, let's get this new plugin, let's get this new thing, and it got to a point where I was like, hold on a minute, do you know what I'm saying? It's like, I used to make tunes with a 14-second sampler and a fucking one broken speaker and a dodgy turntable, and it's like I was kind of like getting blinded by the technology. It was like, technology is here to help us get to somewhere. It doesn't replace that. You know what I'm saying? It was like, you people use the computers now, and you've got endless amounts of sample time in there, endless plugins, all these presets, and all these standard sounds, and it was like, I kind of went, you know what, I need to get back to what's really me. And so I just sat down for a minute, listened to my tunes, listened to what I was about, and then just got my sampler out. Sat down, got all my old samples out, started to listen to them again, got all my records out, started to listen to them again. It was like, okay, let me just get back to what I do best. And I just sat down and just started to sample again. Spent 2 days sampling, 2 days editing, 2 days making sounds, 3 days chopping sounds up, making basses again. Do you know what I mean? I was like, okay, cool. I know what I'm going to do now. I know what I'm about now.
So it's fair to say that some of the most beautiful things come from the most limited means, basically.
I think that you are forced to do things you don't normally do when you haven't got the resources to do them. It gets that going. You know what I'm saying? It's like without being creative and having an imagination, you really are stuck. You know what I'm saying? And I think what happens when you don't have the resources you need, it makes you be creative. It makes you think in another way. How can I get this sound like that? How can I make this sample sound like that? How can I make these, you know what I'm saying? We discovered the art of sampling for 1.5 seconds, because you had to. You know, our first sampler had 14 seconds, so you had to use it wisely. So, you know, you'd make a whole tune from 14 seconds. That takes a lot of skill. You know, really understanding a break. All you need of a beat is 2.5 seconds. And so then you loop it, and you learn how to loop. And then the 760 is great. Before that, we had the 550 and the 330, and they had functions on there where you could loop forward, loop backwards, loop and continual loop. So it had all these different things on it. So we'd have one beat doing loop forward, loop backwards, continual loops. And so in a track, you'd have different mixes of the same beat, just looping at different start points. And, you know, we kind of got creative in that way. Same thing with basses. You'd have a bass and it would go one way, then the other way, then you'd do a fill. It was like, you know, we really had to get in deep. That's all you had, 14 seconds. You have to understand how to use that and get the most out of it.
So would you recommend if people got creative block to just bring it back to basics?
Do you know what I've done? I got rid of all my shit. I've gone back to basics. I've just gone back to how I started to make music. I got rid of my desk. I got rid of all these other stuff, all these modules that I bought. You know, I mean, I sat in there and I saw all these modules, and it's like, where do I start? It's like, you know, I'm going to try and do this, I'm going to try and do that. It's like, you know what? Just make life simple. Go back to the simplest way that you can make music and start from there. You know, have a start point. For me, it was about sampling records and a sampler and you know, my Atari. So I haven't gone back to the Atari. That's too far back, but I've gone back to as far as I can go back and still be current as well.
So let's move on to the Reprazent era, because I think that's definitely worth talking about, and how you came up with the concept with Roni and Diane Sub for Reprazent and Dynamite, of course. When did that idea start forming?
Well, we got approached, first of all, by Paul Martin and Giles Peterson from Talking Loud. And well, before that, we actually got approached by James Lavelle from Mo Wags. And we did a remix for him, and then we did a remix for Giles and that. And it was kind of on the cards. We almost got signed to Mo Wags. And then James kind of longed it out a bit. And then Giles and them guys, they were a bit more on point. And so we signed with them. And really, that whole thing just came about from being trying to go to the next level. We were always about just trying to make another tune that was better than the last one, trying to do concepts that was better than the last one. So we did, on Full Cycle, we did a couple of compilations and stuff, and we were kind of building towards something. We had a collection of tunes, and then, you know, we got signed, and it was like, okay, we all sat around and started to discuss how this project was going to be and how it was going to go. And we were fortunate enough that we already had Dynamite on board, and then we met Underlie, the singer. She's like a local Bristol girl. And the whole thing just kind of grew organically, really. You know, Roni was the main architect of that project, but we'd kind of come in at different stages of the project and give some input, you know, and say how certain things could be and whatnot. And, you know, Share the Fool was like one of the big tracks on the project, and that was the case of us just sitting down, all just talking about this tune, and really that just kind of just happened. It was like a section from here, a section from there. That was a real big experimental tune that just kind of came together. So that's the whole project just kind of just grew out of just bits and pieces of different tracks here and there, and then the project just went, just went together, really. And then the live thing came from really just trying to work out how to perform it live and how we were going to do it. And, you know, we didn't want to just be DJing the project. We wanted to, you know, form a band and actually go out there and actually play it. We didn't have an idea of how to do it. It hadn't really been done before the way that we did it, so we kind of had to work out how to get the samples and play them live and get the drummer to play in time. And, you know, we used a guy called Clive Deemer, and he'd never played 170 before. So, you know, he'd be like trying to keep up, and we'd say, no, you have to play. We'd play him records and stuff and say, look, this is what it sounds like, this is what you got to try and do. And he was like, it took him a while, fair play to him, he got it. I mean, Clive Deemer was Portishead's drummer, so he's gone from like 100 BPMs to 160 BPMs. It was like, do you know what I mean? A bit of a culture shock for him, but he got it. And then we had Cy John, a bass player. He's from Bristol. And we just spent like 8 months in the studio rehearsing and jamming and just trying to put this thing together, all these ideas and these vibes and stuff. And eventually it came together after about 3 years.
No, I mean, it's easy to forget now, but I remember that first Jazz Cafe gig that you did, and you know, until that point, like, no one had really seen people drumming, you know, drummers doing drum and bass, you know, and also there weren't a great deal of songs around. There were loads of records with samples of singers and stuff, but there weren't a great deal of songs, you know, so in many ways it was an extremely innovative thing to do. Now it just seems normal. You always see drummers playing drum and bass and whatever, but it's like that really broke the mold in a lot of ways. Did you have fun touring it as a band? Was that a laugh?
Oh, for real, man. Do you know what I mean? We were like, it was like school camp for about 3 years. You know, we were on a bus, you know, traveling around America, traveling around Europe, you know, and, you know, meeting people. It was like, you know, you couldn't have, you know, dreamt of it. You know, I mean, it was like beyond anything that we ever thought we were ever going to do. You know, and it was great. It was a great adventure. It's probably one of the best parts of my life. You know, hanging out with your friends all the time. You know, touring, going all around the world. It was crazy.
And I think it's a pretty interesting model to talk about Reprazent getting signed because, like, as with many underground scenes, there comes a point, maybe a tipping point, where major record labels, or whatever vehicle it will be in the future, start to sniff around. And, you know, I remember in the mid-90s, certainly with drum and bass, you know, all the majors were starting to sign people up, you know, one by one. And you did it a really interesting way because you all signed to a major, but without using any of your names. So you signed Reprazent, but still you could do records as Krust. Still you could do records as Sav or Die for Full Cycle.
What actually happened is that they signed the project as State of Mind. So they didn't actually have the name Reprazent or any of our other names. So, and that was like a kind of an oversight of theirs, or undersight, I guess, you know what I mean? And that it kind of worked in our favor in a way, because we suddenly realized that they didn't own any of our names and we weren't contracted not to do it.
So it wasn't actually a conscious decision on your part?
No, it's just we never had a name. You know, we were playing with the idea of State of Mind at the time, and that's what we signed under. And then we came up with Reprazent afterwards.
And how do you feel that intervention by the kind of major labels or the mainstream, or however you want to phrase it, affects a scene?
Well, you know, nothing can stay underground forever. And I think that just by things progressing in a certain way, it's going to grow. And you're going to get attention from certain people. And I think in our case, we were quite fortunate. We had a lot of creative control. No one told us what to do. And so we kind of did an extension of what we were doing on our own label anyway. So it was kind of a natural thing. And because we were working with Talking Loud, and we were working with, you know, Giles and Paul, they were quite mellow and relaxed, and they kind of let us do exactly what we wanted. And we were quite fortunate that we kept it on that level. But, you know, majors are always going to be sniffing around what's new. They always want to know what's new. They always want to be at the cutting edge of what's new and to say they were the first to do it. You know, and I think it's up to individuals to see how they can profit from it. You know, you know, for us, it worked because we were able to take a music that was created in the streets of England, and we were able to go and tour in Japan, Australia, in America. And all of a sudden the music became bigger and more worldwide and more well-known. But it was still underground in England. Do you know what I mean? It was still underground in all these places that we were going to. You You know, even though we were signed to a major, we were still going and playing to like 1,000 people in America, or 1,000 people. It wasn't like we would go and play these massive stadiums. It was still quite underground at that time. Still quite elusive, still quite, cool. The majors they didn't really understand what they had. There's only Paul and Giles who really understood what it was. The record, the majors didn't really get it. They couldn't understand it.
Did they understand it a bit more when you won the Mercury Prize?
Oh, it made perfect sense then. It was a vehicle for them to make money. And from their point of view, that's what they want. It's the record industry, when you get to that level, is quite simple. You either sell a shitload of units or you don't. And once you understand how to play the game, once you understand the language of recoup, it's a whole different ball game.
And how did that affect your situation?
What, recoup?
Yeah. Like, were you savvy to that before you went into it?
No. I mean, I was lucky that I had the experience with Fresh Forward, so I kind of understood it. I knew Simon from back then as well, our manager, Simon Goff, so it was just a natural thing for me to get him involved. I had a relationship with him already, so it was like a phone call. Okay, Simon, he got involved before all of that anyway, because we were getting to a certain level that we couldn't manage anymore. We needed a bit of professional help. We were getting into a situation where the label was getting a lot of interest from publishers, and so we had to start to figure out how to run a business now. It wasn't just about making records and having fun and doing all the other things. Now it's a case of there's money coming in, you need to have an accountant, you need to have a proper management, and you need to know what to do with this money and how to manage it and deal with contracts. So all of a sudden, it got serious. It wasn't fun anymore, do you know what I mean? For a minute, it was like, you're right, we would end up being in meetings with record companies and in these environments, getting contracts that thick that you couldn't understand, and you had a manager who wanted 20%. So you're learning all this new language. And it was like, okay, this isn't just about sitting in the studio and making tunes all night. Now we had to like put a thinking cap on and figure out, okay, this is what it's really about if we're going this direction. And in a way, it naturally went there. We didn't look for any of this. It was just the fact that the records were selling more. We were getting more attention. We were playing more gigs. There was more money coming in. You had to, we signed off the dole. We started to make the social, you get social in England. So we signed off the dole, you know what I'm saying? And then we started to get regular, agency. Then we had to start paying tax and VAT. So all of a sudden, it's a business now. So someone had to come in and show us how to do this thing properly. It wasn't. So with all of that now in mind, it's a different ball game. You know what I mean? So you have to get professional. You have to go into these meetings and start trying to understand what these people are talking about. So eventually you get it, and eventually you learn. But you're making the mistakes along the way.
And how does all that affect your own label, the smaller label up the road that you're still running, and and your relationships with the people there?
Well, we benefited from it because on all the stuff that came from Talking Loud, we had a Full Cycle logo on there, and and we directed everybody to our website or to our merchandise. And so I mean, that was the good part about it. So as well as touring as Reprazent, everybody knew we were from Full Cycle, and so we used it as a vehicle to help promote our own business. And one thing we did, we learned very early, how the majors worked it. We studied it, we scienced it. We talked to everybody in the industry, and in there we spoke to the press people, we spoke to the promotions, and we just really scienced it and tried to understand how it worked and tried to understand the language and made a lot of friends and a lot of contacts in there, and then we kind of just used it on our own imprint. And I'm saying it was like just modeled it really. When the whole thing ended, we kind of just did, right, this is what we had a saying, right, this is what they do, this is what we're going to do. You know what I mean? We were trying to sell units, this is how you do it. You do it this way. You go and get press, you do it this way. You go and do that, you go and do it this way. There are certain principles in the business that you have to emulate. And if you stick to the principles, you'll do what you need to do. But you can in amongst those principles, you can be flexible and you can still be creative and you can still do certain things. You're in the business of distribution. You want to get your music out, so get your music out.
And if you had to pick a couple of principles, like 3 principles, for people that don't want those pitfalls, for people that, even though they've been told it 100 times, just a couple of things, don't have to be specific, but just
only get a manager when you can't do the business yourself. That's a standard thing. You don't just go out and get a manager Second of all, don't get it twisted. You know what I'm saying? The people you meet along the way aren't your friends. You know what I'm saying? You have your friends when you in your crew, and that's it. Everybody else is in it. If you meet them along the way, they know you through the business. So keep it business. You know, try and be as professional as possible. Do you know what I mean? Always get it in writing, and always get it checked over. Be as professional as possible, as much as you can.
So I want to go back to earlier, you were talking about the expansion of the scene and how it went from something very small to something big, and drum and bass is a beautiful example of how something, you know, that was very localized has become totally global. I mean, for a number of years, people outside of the inner circle of drum and bass producers and DJs could be forgiven for thinking that it was a closed shop, you know, in terms of the way that it was, you know, seemed to be a club, and like you say, you know, music house and all of that whole thing. Where was the tipping point where suddenly people were accepting people making tunes in America, or accepting people making records outside the UK, or, you know, from Asia or Australia, and where it, you know, your sound and involvement in Reprazent and all of that stuff, when it exploded?
I think that it just kind of gradually got that way. I think DJs started to go abroad. You know what I mean? I think people started to go Germany, France, you know, just places around Europe. And gradually it started to build up, and then you start to go a bit further to Japan, and then people was going to America. So slowly it was starting to just spread out, you know. And, do you know what I mean, people were starting to hear about it from other scenes, you know what I mean. I think I think it's just from different walks of life, people from hip hop, people from house, people from jazz, they kind of recognized the elements in it, and it kind of brought, you know, expanded from there, really. I think from our point of view, from Reprazent, I think that we were fortunate that we actually got put into different scenarios. I mean, we were playing to the typical jazz audience when we were going on the road. Our first tour was with Galliano, Sean Lee, and Kareem Karundaram. So we were like playing, you know, there was like a rock band, it was Galliano, sort of jazz fusion, and it was us, Jungle, like playing these festivals, you know what I'm saying? It was like, it was different, do you know what I'm saying? I remember when me and Dynamite toured with a rock band in America called Saul Coffin. The drummer, who's a friend of mine now, his name's Yuval Gabi, he was in London, he picked up this tape, he'd heard about jungle, and he bought this tape, and it had some jungle on it. So he took it back to his band in America and played it something, and they were like, okay, they could hear it. He goes, yeah, well, I want these guys to come and tour with us. So we went to America, and we're like opening up for this rock band, and it was crazy. We were playing in some places, and we go there, and we start playing, and people would just come in, and they'd be like, for about like a good 45 minutes, and it was hard work. It was very intimidating. Just, you know, you got these hardcore rock fans listening to you playing this up-tempo music, looking at you like, what the, you're in the wrong club, aren't you, mate? But after about an hour of it, they would slowly come round. You know what I mean? And we saw it for about 12 nights. It was exactly the same thing. First 45 minutes, everyone would be just standing there watching us. And then after an hour, they trying to work out how to dance to it. You know what I mean? But Dynamite was like showing them, he'd be up on stage, showing them how to dance. And slowly but surely, they would get into it. And I think that was, for me, a real eye-opener about how the music was crossing over. And people who didn't have any idea about what it was could potentially get involved and hear it and maybe like this music they'd never actually heard. And I saw something in these on that tour of these people, and that kind of opened my eyes to it. And that's kind of how the music generally went. Same for me, we went to Japan. When we went there, the first time we did Reprazent there, we played, and we Reprazent, we had this reaction where we play, and everyone would go mad, the crowd would go mad. We went to Japan, we played the first song, and everyone just stood there like, and we're like, fucking hell. What's this about? But that was just the Japanese, that's how they were. They didn't really go mad, they didn't really react. And then we went there a couple of years later, and then it all changed, and they kind of got into it. So throughout the whole sort of 5-year period of when everyone first started to go away to maybe when it started to really get big, there was a big change. Everyone started to see and understand this music and then get into it. And then actually people started to making it from their own point of view, like the Americans and some of the Europeans. That happened. That's only sort of happened in the last 4 to 5 years, really. But that's what happens. You make a music, people emulate it, like we was emulating hip-hop in the beginning, back in the day. that's what happens. So the American cats are doing the same thing, but now it's kind of cool. They've got their own vibe of it. Same thing with everywhere else. Everyone's got their own version of it now, and it's on the level right now. It's good.
So the Represent thing kind of took a breather, or naturally came to a halt for a minute, and you did another record, right? You did your solo record.
I did, yeah, a solo album, Coded Language.
And the title track of that was
It was called Coded Language.
featuring.
Saul Williams. Yeah, I mean, I had the original track of that just made, and I didn't really know what to do with it. I knew I wanted a vocal on there, but Giles and Paul Martin, they knew this cat, Saul Williams, and they suggested that we meet, and I brought a track. He already had this whole thing written out in this fucking scroll thing that he just recited one day, and it was like, I never heard anything like it. And so the next day he went into the studio and we put the track down, and that became the title track of the album.
You should check it.
Yeah.
Coded Language featuring Saul Williams from the album Coded Language, right? So where are we at now? What are you up to in the present day?
Now, I just finished a new album called Hidden Knowledge, and that came out earlier this year on our full cycle. I've just been putting a band together, rehearsing with them for the last couple of months. We did our first show last week in Cargo. That was fun.
Last week?
Yeah, last week. Yeah. So really just getting this live thing together, really, getting the band tight, rehearsing, kind of just getting the next project really together.
And the new album is out?
The new album's out, it's in the shops now. It's called Hidden Knowledge, it's on full cycle. This is from the new album, yes, a track called Belief System.
All right, let's check that out now, just to get an idea. I mean, evidently the deeper side of the music has always been your thing. How do you feel about the state of music generally, electronic dance music at the moment, but also your scene and your ability to keep making music that deep within that?
I think the music scene's interesting right now. There's a lot of new music. Just being here at this week, I've heard some fucking outstanding music. You know what I mean? People brought stuff and recommended stuff, and so I mean, I'm kind of happy with the scene. In the drum and bass right now, it's getting good. It's getting exciting. There's some cats out there really pushing it again. Some exciting stuff. Some new cats coming through with some new techniques, and it's getting healthy again. I think it's gone. You know, everything moves in cycles. So I think we're going through one, and we're going back to the music side of things again, the jungle side of things again, the big basses, the unusual arrangements. You know what I'm saying? The dropping the unexpected drops, and it's good, it's exciting.
And in your own life, what cycle are you at in your own life in terms of creating?
Creating?
Creating, moving, you know, life stuff.
I just kind of caught me off guard there, brother. Just whatever, man. Do you know what I mean? I'm kind of just following my own thing, really. I think I'm trying to just have fun. I'm trying to create. I'm trying to just explore different things in the music and in life, and just trying to go forward. You know, I try not to do the same things over again. Like with my music, I try and to see what's next. You know, I think it's been good that I've been involved in the music and in the label, and that we've been able to just keep on pushing each other and go forward and keep building on stuff. And I think, you know, having a good core, solid group around you who are actually on the same wavelength helps as well, because, you know, we can keep each other in check, and we can keep saying, oh, let's do this and let's do that, and we keep on building. So the label's starting to progress now. We've got Full Cycle TV, which is like us from the filming stuff that we did from Reprazent. it's kind of taken on a life of its own, and we've gone out and we shot documentaries with people that we really admire in the music, and kind of got their take on the history of their music, and you know, just to see where our music backgrounds come from. So we're really excited about that. That's kind of like one of the new projects that we're doing. You know, we're starting a down-tempo label as well, so we can explore more of the varieties of the music that we're kind of into. It's kind of like, you know, for us, we're going back to our roots in a sense, you know what I'm saying? I mean, we came from the down-tempo thing, we've explored the drum and bass thing, and it will still explore it, but as well, we're kind of like getting back into the down-tempo thing. You know, there's a real pull towards that. Dai's just done this new project with Ben West Beach, and Roni's just done a thing with Victor Duplay. I'm working on this new project with my brother from the Fresh 4 era. So we're kind of just growing up, moving on, exploring new territories, and just seeing what else is out there.
How do you think we'll be experiencing music in 10 years' time?
It's interesting. I think the formats will just keep on changing, and you know, I've heard of crazy stuff, optical drives and stuff with like music and on lasers and hard drives and stuff, and I don't know where it's going. I heard something the other day when someone said it's going to be beamed directly into people's heads. I mean, that's kind of already happening. There was a guy, a disabled guy, who was disabled from the neck down. They put a chip in his head and he sent the first email by fault. So, I mean, the technology is there for these things to be available, and it's just a matter of time before it becomes readily available to the general public. I mean, anything is possible, do you know what I'm saying? Anything is possible. You know, I just use the technology, man.
And you've been studying recently beyond the technology.
Yeah, I mean, I've been getting into consciousness. I mean, my last album was called Hidden Knowledge, and it was based on the stuff that I've been studying. And, you know, I've been studying a lot of consciousness, a lot of spirituality, and that's kind of been a driving force in my life as well as the music. So I've been combining the two things together, you know, through the last couple of years, and then it was a real conscious decision to actually say, well, let's make this project, you know, around the subject. You know, let's call it Hidden Knowledge. You know, let's talk about the subjects that aren't really available. You know, every track on the album is titled with a name that you could go deeper into if you really wanted to and find out more information, and get knowledge. You know what I'm saying? Because I think that we're at a point in time now where we're all looking for something, and we're all looking for some answers to questions that we don't get from the mainstream. And so, you know, I just did what I do in my music and just put something out there. And on the CD, there's information, there's websites to look for, and just to gather information. I think that if everyone knows something about something, they should teach someone else about it. That's where I'm coming from. So that simple analogy, each one teach one, is where, you know, I mean, this music and what I'm about right now.
Amen. So let me open it out to the floor before we go super deep and go off on metaphysics. Any questions?
Yes, Krust. Yeah, I was just going to ask, like, when you lot started up doing what you're doing, was everyone like on the same sort of like high drive, or did it like work in cycles where someone would have more drive and then the next man would have the next drive and then everyone was pushing each other? Like,
yeah, a bit of both. I mean, we used to do things where our first studio was in one of Roni's bedroom, basically. So we used to make cheese and potato pie and take it in turns in the studio. So 2 people would be up in the studio like all night, and then the next 2 would come in the morning and finish off the tune that they were making. And so we had this thing where it was like a 24-hour cycle of making tunes for about 4 or 5 years. So whenever someone couldn't do it, someone else would fill in. So it was a continual thing.
Yes. In terms of the band, you say that you just started up. What's the setup? I mean, what instruments you have playing? What's your role in it?
I play all like the main samples and stuff, and then I've got a keyboard player, and then it's a drummer, a bass player, and 2 vocalists. And it's the same kind of setup that a kind of normal band would take, but we just we've gone back into the studio and got all the samples from all the songs that's on the album, really chopped them up, figured out a way how to play them live, because sometimes most of the stuff is loop-based, so we've had to actually chop it all up so that you can have the freedom to play it in time with the drummer, who can actually, sometimes his tempo will vary. So we've just chopped it all up. The keyboard player, he'll play all the lines, all the big lines, all the big string phrases and stuff, and then the bass player will just, he's freestyling the basses anyway, so he's got a lot of freedom within the realm of what we're doing. So really, it's just a case of just trying to get everything that we've done live, sorry, in the studio, and just try and take it to the live thing and really kind of like get as close as possible to the sounding of the record.
I just thought it was interesting that you're using a band for drum and bass. I was really taken with that and the sound of how live this record is. You're saying that you are cutting the samples to the drums, not the drums to the samples. Like, as far as using Pro Tools, like how do you grid out your drums, and like are you like putting the bass in the
Pro Tools?
Yeah, or are you gridding out your samples to the drums to give it that sort of live feeling?
It depends. On that tune there, that's a live drummer, so most of that tune was, on that last tune of the jazz one, most of that tune was all live, so it was quite simple to do. You know, we just mapped everything out, we synced the drums in, sampled them back, got them inside a grid, and then, you know, the chords were just played on top. And then there's a case of just keeping on layering on top, get a live keyboard player came in, played some of the bass, I played some of the other bass, he played some chords, some roads and stuff, and then it just kind of just builds up, and then all the electronic sounds I'm playing in there, I'm looping up and stuff. So then when we come to play it live, when we come to play it live now, most of it's live already, so the keyboard player, he can just say, okay, I hear what you're doing there, and he'll translate it. All the other stuff is just loop-based, so we're chopping those up. Because you want to keep in time with the drummer, not the other way around. The drummer's going to be your metronome. He's the one that keeps the time of everybody. Everyone needs to watch him, or at least have an ear on him. And then you play around what he's playing, because he's gonna change tempos. He's going to stop and start whenever, you know what I'm saying? So you need to follow him. And your samples you need to have the freedom to play your sample like it is an actual sound in the keyboard. So you chop it up as much as possible, have them more spread out along the keyboard.
Hello. Actually, I just wanted to ask, as I know, if I'm not mistaken, the first time I've heard about the drum and bass in Django, it was like in the early 90s. And since then, the drum and bass have been changing through all these genres, like collaborating with jazz music. Then it developed to two-step and whatever. And sometimes it became more hard, and then again back to basics, like a first Django tracks. So, and as I see, the drum and bass haven't been changed, actually, hasn't been developed, and went forward since late 90s, maybe, if I'm not mistaken. So what would be actually, how do you see the future for drum and bass scene, and what would be possible genres to mix with, to create a new sound, or whatever?
I think that's going to come down to the individuals making the music, that they want to create, how they want to create. Everybody in the scenes come from a different background. You got guys coming from house, you got guys coming from techno, you got guys coming from hip hop, guys coming from jazz, and that fusion, that's what made the music what it was. I think after a period of time, it kind of narrowed down to just one kind of vibe. I think the audience got used to a certain style of music, and producers started to cater for that, and it kind of just went in one direction. Now it's kind of growing again in different directions, where everyone's being able to do their own different style and still get noticed for it, and the music's grow from that. I think that the music is endless. It's got a billion and one different possibilities. There's no one way or right way. It's just down to the individuals to do what they think they want to do, and stand by it and play it. I mean, I couldn't tell you what everyone else is doing. You know, where I'm going is, I'm just going out there wherever it takes me.
Because actually there was a time when your albums was like very dark and like the previous song we played, and very like intense. And now as I see you're going back to that jungle atmospheric kind of.
You know why that is? Because the time when you made the album, you were probably going through a lot of fucking stuff, do you know what I'm saying? So it comes out, I was probably living in this basement flat with no light coming through, smoking a lot of weed, so that's how that album sounded, you know what I'm saying? And then after a while, you know what I mean, you can afford to move out and live in another place, you get a bigger studio or somewhere else, and it's kind of, doesn't change your music, but it kind of changes your outlook on things, and so it reflects in the music. What you go through at the time reflects in, you know what I'm saying, reflects in the music. And so, yeah, I think, you know, at the time when I did this, the coded language thing, it was a real turning point yeah, it was like a real turning point. You know, I wasn't angry, but, do you know what I'm saying, we were trying to get something across, and I think that was a good way of doing it. Now, do you know what I'm saying, I'm still angry. No, but now it's like, I kind of worked out a way how to actually make it a bit more musical, so I'm kind of putting that in there now.
Sorry, I have a question. I was going to say, when it comes down to the music, would you say like you guys named the music, or was it external people? When you started making the music, was it like, yeah, I'm going to make a drum and bass sound, I'm going to call it drum and bass, or I'm going to call it jungle, I'm going to call it rave, or?
No, they called it, the media called it whatever it was called. You know, we were just making this music, and we never had a name for it. It was called jungle techno for a minute, and then it was called jungle, and then later on people decided to call it drum and bass. You know what I mean? I just make the music. I don't really care what they call it.
Would you say there's any particular reason why the drum and bass names like stayed there for so long? Or?
Drum and bass? I think drum and bass is a more user-friendlier name. I think when people call it jungle, it kind of brought up connotations of something that the media weren't comfortable with, and so then they came up with a new name for it that people kind of took on. I don't really have any, whatever, you can call it whatever you want, as long as, you know what I mean, people make it and it's from the heart and it expresses some real emotions, then that's what it's about at the end of the day. I think it's easy for people to categorize it and put it into boxes because it's easier to sell that way as well. So they put it here and they put it there and they put a name on it. This is what you should buy, this is what you're into, this is the movement, this is the way you look, and this is how you dance to it. And so you have these whole kind of like, you know, set ideas about what it is. But apart from that, the people who make it don't really think like that. They're in the studio, they know what they're doing. They have their own communities where they associate with these things, and you know what I'm saying?
Do you reckon it can make a scene kind of stronger by having that one umbrella name, like across the whole world, so to speak, really?
Maybe, I guess, just for identification purposes, probably. I don't know.
Could you share with us like what you learned while studying spirituality and like, you know, what's in that hidden knowledge? Could you share with us some things you learned over the last couple of years?
Well, we have an understanding based on our belief systems about what we're able to take in or not take in. So we have like a limit on what we're going to believe. Most people, when you talk about coincidences or things that they can't understand straight away, they'll say it's a coincidence, and if you explain to them what it really is, they'll have a hard time understanding it. That's due to our upbringing and the way that we've been taught and the way that we've been indoctrinated into a certain type of lifestyle through all of our backgrounds, through education, from our parents, from going to school, from just generally mixing in society. Do you know what I'm saying? Society is like, keeps us into this way of thinking. You know what I mean? Most of the knowledge that can help us get to where we want to go through is kept outside of our circles, outside of our schools, outside of our establishments, and so we don't have access to it. So when we talk about spiritual things, you know, we always point at that guy saying, he's way out there, he's talking about this stuff. It's because we don't understand it. It's not common knowledge to everybody, so we can't all have a basis to say, yeah, I learned that in school. Whereas if I talk to you about maths or algebra, you know what I'm talking about, because we've all learned that in school. It's a basic prerequisite for school and for studying. But when you start to talk about other spiritual stuff now, you have this boundary. So once you get past that, you get to understand about the power of the mind, what your mind can actually do, and you start to understand what you actually are as a human being and as a part of nature. We've become this sophisticated animal that lives outside of nature, and it's really, once you start to understand it, you start to see that it's quite an alien thing to do, because if you are on this planet, you are part of it. So why do we live outside of the rules of nature? Do you know what I'm saying? You start asking yourself another set of questions. Okay, so I'm a part of nature, then what am I made of? And then you start going to another set of questions. Okay, I'm made of energy, and I'm made of matter, and I have a spirit, and I have a consciousness, I have a subconscious. And once you start going into those type of questions, a whole new world starts to open up, and you start to access a whole new level of knowledge. And it's not even hidden. That's the thing about it. That's the joke about it. Anyone can find out. You can go to a library right now. I mean, I went to a bookshop just down there. I bought a book yesterday about it. And it's like, it's so much out there that you can find out. But once you start looking for it, you will find it. We all have like an inner guidance system, like GPS satellite tracking. We have a natural one built in. Once you set your mind to something, you will automatically start finding it and start looking for it. And that's just one of the things that we're not taught about. And that's why it starts to get complicated after that, really.
It makes sense. I mean, like for me, like about 10, 12 years ago, it was the first time I got hooked up to drum and bass. Like, drum and bass was one of the first sounds I actually heard, and it sort of felt very visceral, and it hit you. It's like no denying it. It hit you. Ooh. But that also led to my discovery of other genres. From there, I found out about other sounds. From there, I went back to like learning about dub, and then I got into Detroit techno and other genres as well. But like, it was from drum and bass. Like, I remember the first time I heard drum and bass, and it hit me, and it was so visceral in that sense. And I discovered more beyond that. And discovered its roots and further and forward, you know, like broken beats or whatever, and how it extends from like a family of drum and bass.
Right.
Yeah, that sense, and it's all out there. It's about like access to it and learning about it, and like from where I come from, it's a very like it's sort of very conservative culture, and you don't really get access to much, you know. It's
but that's just the planet.
Yeah, and so it's just about getting out there and learning and meeting people and discovering new things and like what's not in front of our eyes.
Definitely.
Yeah, thank you.
Another question. How has this new knowledge you've come into contact with changed, if at all, your creative process?
Didn't really change my creative process that much. I mean, how it's changed what I do. I want to put more of the message into my music. I think that subconsciously we all put something of ourselves into what we do anyway. So, you know, maybe on some level I was always doing it, and maybe on a level we're always doing that. You know what I'm saying? One thing I have learned about metaphysics and the spirituality and consciousness, you can't switch it off. So whether you understand it or not, you are always on it, and that's one of the not problems, but that's one of the ways that we get caught out, because we're attracted to certain things that are negative because of it. So unless you're aware of it, do you know what I'm saying? Like, there's a lot of negative messages out there. Most of it is beyond the threshold of what we normally see. We experience 1% of our reality, what's going on around us. So 99% of what's actually going on in this room, we can't even see or sense. So that's how subliminal messages work. They attack us on a level that we don't necessarily are visual of all the time.
Any more? Any more for any more?
Sorry, I got a drum and bass question.
Thank you.
You got in drum and bass the whole doublet business, and
Sorry?
You got the doublet thing in drum and bass and the inner circle thing, and through this people joining the internet to hear the newest dubs. And do you think that doublet business destroyed your record sales?
I
Do you know what I mean?
No, explain it again, please.
Okay, you got the internet, and people go into the internet to download MP3 or
Right.
like DJ sets to hear the newest tracks, and so they don't have to buy them anymore because they're just released in a half year or in a year.
It's a hard question to answer. I mean, without the internet, I guess you would probably, the music might not have traveled as far as it has. And then, you know, there is an argument that people have been downloading a lot of tunes so they don't necessarily buy it. You know, I've been trying to get my head around it for a while. I don't know what the actual answer to that is. We need one or the other to help each other. We need the distribution of the internet to help make the music more popular. But because of the internet, people are actually getting more access to the tunes. So yeah, they're not necessarily buying it so much. I mean, it's a catch-22 system. I don't really have an answer to that. I mean, it's just how it is at the moment, I guess. I think until we find a better way to police the music and make it more protected, then we're going to have to find a way to use it to our advantage, I guess.
Yeah, I just thought it's something special for drum and bass because of the doublet thing, you know.
No, I mean, that just came about because we needed access to being able to cut a record instantly. We couldn't wait to put it on the test press. That's like two or 3 weeks away. You know, you wanted to make a record, and this is before CDJ, so you wanted to make a record and go out and play it that weekend, and that's where dub plates came from, really. Just being able to have an instant access, to have a tune that nobody else had as well, to really have an exclusive set. And that's how a lot of DJs made their name back in the day, by having an exclusive set. If you were fortunate enough to be a producer and to be a DJ, you'd go and make your own set of music, go and cut it, and that's what set you apart from everybody else. And that's why you got, you know, booked, or you were popular, because you had an exclusive set. And that's where that came from. It's, you know, I think that the internet came along, people would do a show somewhere or play on a radio somewhere, some kids would record it and put it on the internet. And I don't think the intention was to, you know, take the sales down or to, you know, rob anybody or anything. It was just, you know, this is what these cats do and I want the world to hear it. So everyone had access to the internet. So I think it genuinely started as a thing just to give access to people who didn't have access to the scene. And then probably from there, the kids worked out, well, why should I buy the fucking tune if I can get it free off the internet? And maybe, you know, it just went like that. I don't know.